A horror tale in the old building. One day, I was looking for a cafe with Wi-Fi to send a few emails. I stopped in front of an old building that had a sign for a cafe on the 6th floor. Inside the entrance was a dark hallway leading to a small elevator. I pressed the button to go up. The elevator doors opened and I stepped inside. In many Asian countries, buildings often skip the 4th floor because the number 4 is considered unlucky. It sounds like the word death. Yet the elevator stopped and the doors slid open. I began to sense that something was wrong. In front of me stretched a hallway completely swallowed by darkness. By the dim light spilling from the elevator, I could make out furniture covered in white cloths. Piles of objects long abandoned. It looked as if no one had entered for years. I thought I must have pressed the wrong button. I glanced at the elevator panel, but no floor number was lit. Suddenly I noticed movement at the far end of the hallway. I couldn't tell what it was, but it looked like a woman. A girl in a white dress, slowly walking straight toward the elevator. Terror gripped me. I frantically pressed the "close door" button. The elevator lights flickered, then went out. Everything plunged into darkness. I was so frightened I nearly lost control. Then the figure vanished. The lights came back on. The doors shut, and the elevator began to rise to the 6th floor. I exhaled in relief. When the doors opened this time, I was at the internet cafe. I went to the counter and told the staff member what had just happened. Her face turned pale. She said several customers and employees had experienced the exact same thing, though she hadn't seen it herself. She told me the building's history. Years ago, the 4th floor had housed a thriving hair salon. One day, a woman who worked there took her own life in the salon. No one ever knew why. The salon tried to stay open, but strange, unsettling events kept happening and drove customers away. Sometimes the water would suddenly run red like blood. Others said that when they looked in the mirrors they saw a ghostly figure standing behind them. And when they turned around, no one was there. The reputation ruined the business. Eventually the salon closed. The landlord tried to rent the floor to other businesses, but everyone backed out as soon as they learned the story. He lowered the rent to almost nothing. Finally, someone agreed to open a stationery shop. But as soon as renovations began, a string of bizarre accidents occurred. Workers' tools disappeared and were found in strange places. A large mirror suddenly shattered when no one was near it. One worker's hand was crushed when the elevator doors slammed without warning. Terrified, the workers refused to continue. The landlord gave up on ever renting the 4th floor. He even replaced every elevator button and reprogrammed the system so no one could select that floor. But people say the elevator still stops there on its own. And when the doors open, they sometimes see the woman who died emerging from the darkness. To this day, I still don't know why she did it. The terrifying ride. This next story didn't happen to me. It happened to a church friend of mine, and he asked me to share it. At the time, he was 32. Let's call him Matt. He's a big, strong man. One night after work, Matt set out to catch a taxi. A week earlier he had lost his phone, so he couldn't call anyone for help. It was past 11 p.m. A few other people were waiting for rides. After a couple of minutes, a small passenger van pulled up. It was cheaper than a taxi, and Matt was exhausted from a long day, so he decided to get in. Inside, a teenage boy sat next to the driver collecting fares. Soon 2 more boys got in and sat in the front seats. About 5 minutes into the ride, the fare collector asked if anyone wanted a Coca-Cola. The boys in front agreed and started drinking. They offered one to Matt. Thirsty, he took it. Not long after, drowsiness swept over him. He nodded off and noticed the 2 boys ahead of him had slumped over too. Half conscious, he heard strange voices from the back of the van, 2 men speaking in 2 different languages. Through the haze, Matt caught sight of a roadside billboard for a chicken farm. Then everything went black. When he woke, he was lying on the floor of a large barn-like shed. A big table stood nearby with tools scattered on it. The 2 boys were still unconscious beside him. Though dizzy, Matt forced himself up and found a door. He tried to wake the boys, but they didn't move. Outside, voices approached. Peeking through a crack, he saw 3 men coming down from a house on the hill toward the shed. Matt searched frantically and spotted a back exit. He slipped out and fled as quietly as he could. His vision blurred, but he found an unlocked gate and ran. He heard shouting behind him, yet he kept running until he reached a road. Eventually, near dawn, he stumbled into a late-night diner. He told the owner everything. The man called the police. Matt went home and slept nearly all day. When he awoke, he gave the police every detail he remembered. The chicken farm billboard, landmarks, anything. 2 weeks later, the police reported that they had found the bodies of 2 teenage boys in a nearby lake. The autopsy revealed that all of their internal organs were missing. Matt was horrified. The trauma was so great he had to take time off work to recover. The Amazon delivery nightmare. My name is Nikki, and I'm only 19. Last December, during the frantic Christmas rush, I took a seasonal job with Amazon, boxing and delivering packages while the world scrambled for gifts. The work was exhausting, but the thing that unsettled me most wasn't the pace. It was Frank. Frank was a heavy, broad-shouldered man with patchy stubble, cropped hair, and a permanent scowl that seemed etched into his face. Every shift we were assigned to the same delivery truck. I tried small talk twice, hoping to break the ice, but his replies were curt and flat. His eyes had a way of sliding over me as if I were cargo, not a coworker. I thought about asking for another driver, even quitting altogether. But I kept telling myself, it's just a temp job. I can endure a few more weeks. That night, after we dropped off our last package, I assumed we'd head straight back to the warehouse. It was nearly 11 p.m. The streets empty and silent. But instead of turning toward the depot, Frank drove right past the exit. At first, I stayed quiet, convincing myself he'd found a shortcut. Then the city lights dwindled and gave way to endless dark fields. Finally, I gathered my courage and asked, "Where are we going?" Frank didn't shout or sneer. His voice was low and oddly calm, yet it made my blood run cold. "Just need to make a quick stop. Won't take long." Outside, the world had turned to blackness. Abandoned farmhouses loomed like ghosts beneath the moonlight. My unease sharpened with every mile. After what felt like forever, the truck turned onto a rutted path, then stopped in the middle of a cornfield where the stalks rose higher than my head. Frank cut the engine, looked at me with an unreadable stare, and said, "Stay here and wait." Then he stepped out and disappeared down a narrow trail between the rows of corn. The headlights blinked off, plunging me into darkness so thick it pressed against my skin. I sat frozen, heart hammering. My phone was locked in a warehouse locker. Company policy meant no light, no signal, no lifeline. 10 minutes crawled by. 15. The silence roared in my ears. Eventually, I couldn't ignore the pressure in my bladder and slipped into the corn to relieve myself. Every rustle of the dry leaves scraping like claws against my arms. When I returned, a beam of flashlight cut through the darkness. My stomach dropped. I crouched low and inched closer. Voices drifted through the cold night. Frank and a man I didn't recognize. "Where is she?" the stranger demanded, his voice like gravel. I told her to stay in the truck. Frank answered, and for the first time I heard a tremor in his tone. "She must be nearby." The stranger's reply was a blade. "If you don't find her, you're dead." The flashlight swept across the corn. Hunting. Hunting me. I clamped a hand over my mouth. Every heartbeat a thunderclap. Inch by inch I backed away, then turned and ran. Corn stalks whipped my face and arms as I plunged through the dark. Lungs burning, legs screaming. I didn't dare look behind me, certain that if I did, a light would flare and a hand would grab me. At last, I burst onto a deserted country road. No houses, no cars, just cold moonlight. I kept running, half blind with tears, terrified that at any moment I'd feel a hand on my shoulder. I don't know how long I wandered before I finally spotted a faint glow ahead. A late-night diner. The only island of light for miles. I stumbled inside and collapsed against the counter, sobbing out the entire story. The owner listened, face pale, and immediately called the police. I quit the job the next morning. 2 weeks later, my former manager called with unsettling news. Frank never came back. Rumor spread quickly. He was drowning in gambling debt. People whispered that he'd planned to sell me to human traffickers to pay it off. Even now, when I remember that frozen cornfield and the slicing voice of the stranger, a chill runs down my spine. I still wonder what might have happened if I hadn't stepped out of that truck, if I hadn't run when I did.